Hey, what's up, you guys? I am Hope, and you're watching the Asylum Sisters, but I'm by myself today. My sister Haley, the one that I usually film with, she has her own YouTube channel, and she's been doing more videos on that side till we figure out some more videos to do together. So today I found this, last week I found this really interesting story, and I've never heard of it, and my mom hadn't either, so I was like, read it to her, and she's like, oh yeah, that'd be an interesting story. So let's get started. We're going to talk about Katherine Knight. She was born on October 24th of 1955. She was convicted of the murder of her husband, and it is a crazy story, so if you want to continue watching, don't leave. She was the first Australian woman to be sentenced to life in prison without parole, which it was a very big deal because she was the very first one. She had a very bad childhood. Her mother was married several times. Her dad was an alcoholic, and on a daily basis, her father would use violence and intimidation towards her mom and rape her mother at least 10 times a day, which, as you can imagine, that would be pretty brutal. But then her mom kind of wasn't any better. She would sit there and tell Katherine and her sisters about the dad raping her and how much she hated it, and it was just terrible. So she had two bad parents on top of it. Not saying they were the cause of the reason why she acted this way, but what can we say? Katherine claimed she was sexually assaulted by a family member, but it wasn't her dad. But that's what the claims are, but they never confirmed it, and this happened, she says, until she was 11 years old. When Katherine was younger, classmates in school remember her as a bully. She had assaulted one little boy with a weapon at school, so starting to play in. Okay, let's talk about her first marriage. She was married several times, so it's going to be a long one till we actually get to the point. Her first marriage was to David Kellett. If Kellett got in a fight with somebody in town, she would be behind him with like her fist up. Everybody was scared of her. She was known in town as the bully. She was pretty. Katherine and David got married and went home to tell Katherine's mother. Her mother told David a statement that I'm going to read to you, and let me say that David's last name was David Kellett because there's another David in the story. But this was her first husband, and when they got home that night, her mother told him, let me read this to you. You better watch this one or she'll effing kill you. Stir her up the wrong way or do the wrong thing and you're screwed. I'm not going to use the bad words. Don't ever think of cheating on her. She'll effing kill you. She's got something loose. She's got a loose screw somewhere. So even her mama knew that she was crazy, which, I mean, her mom was crazy too. But, and then this is where it starts to get interesting and you see her bad side. On their wedding night, she tried to strangle him because they only had intercourse 3 times. Strangle him. On another occasion, while she was pregnant, she burned his clothes and his shoes. And then she got mad and decided to hit him over the head with a frying pan and knocked him unconscious because he came home late. So he ended up with a fractured skull. The police came and pretty much she talked him out of pressing charges, so she got out of that one. Even though she's fractured his skull, burned his clothes, burned his stuff, and he knows she's crazy, but I guess he was scared of her. In May 1979, he left her after their first child was born, Melissa. So he left her for another woman, which was kind of a smart idea, but just pay attention. The next day after David had left, Katherine was reportedly pushing the baby in a stroller down the road, and she was violently shaking the stroller from side to side. So neighbors around called the cops. She was admitted to a hospital in Tamworth, where she was diagnosed with postpartum depression. She spent several weeks there, and was recovering, so she got to go home. I couldn't find information of where the baby was at this time. So, being released, she put Melissa, which was 2 months old at the time, on the railroad track, knowing that a train was coming. The train wasn't coming yet, but she knew the time that it was coming. And then she stole an axe and went into town and threatened to kill several people, but thank goodness a man was walking by and got Melissa off the train track right before the train was due. So she's just continuing getting crazier and crazier. Katherine was again taken to the same hospital, but apparently recovered and signed herself out the following day. Nowadays, they're going to put you on the 8th floor and you ain't coming home and you ain't going to have your kids, and I don't understand how she got by with this, but I guess back in the day, it was different. After Katherine had signed herself out, a few days later, she went into town and slashed a woman in the face with a knife and demanded to drive her to Queensland, which was where David was living at the time when he left for that other woman, and he was living in Queensland with his mother. The woman escaped after they went to a convenience store, but by the time the police arrived, Katherine had taken a young boy hostage and was threatening to kill the young boy with the knife that she had in her hand. Finally, the police got her into custody and she was sent to a psychiatric hospital, which was what needed to happen this whole time, so all these people wouldn't get hurt in the process. But when she went to the psychiatric hospital, Katherine told the nurses that the reason that she intended to kill the mechanic at that service station because he repaired David's car the day that he left, because David's car was in the shop and he pretty much waited on the car to get fixed and then he left, so she blamed him. And so she was going to go kill the mechanic and then get back in the car with that woman and go find David and kill him and his mother, which was her mother-in-law. This is where it gets crazy. When David was notified by the police of what had happened, about she's coming to kill you, what does he do? He decides to leave his girlfriend, and him and his mom pack their stuff up and come back to town to take care of Katherine when she gets out of the psychiatric hospital. Take care of her after she was coming to kill you and she's crazy. Whatever. On August 9th, 1976, Katherine was released into the custody of her mother-in-law and David. I'd be poisoning her with rat poison, but that's just me, you know. They moved around, and then Katherine finally got settled and obtained a job at a meat store, which that's what she did when she was younger growing up. She was always in like a meat store. On March 6, 1980, they had a second daughter, which was named Natasha. In 1984, Katherine left David and moved in with her parents, but then later claimed disability for hurting her back, and she got a government housing. So they got 2 kids, but now she left him. So here comes the other David. In 1986, she met David Saunders, but a lot of jealousy caused problems between them, which we already know she's crazy. In 1987, she cut the throat of his 2-month-old puppy to show him this would happen if he's cheated on her or did her wrong or ever had an affair. And then she knocked him unconscious with a frying pan. This woman loves some frying pans. In June 1988, she had a 3rd daughter and they named her Sarah. After an argument with David Saunders, where she hit him in the face with an iron before stabbing him in the stomach with a pair of scissors, he ended up leaving, but later returned when he found out that she had cut some of his clothes at home. And he actually went into hiding. He was that scared of her. He left the baby and everything. But then a couple months later, he decided to go see his daughter, and then when he arrived, he had found out that she had went to the police and got a restraining order on him that he couldn't come around because she was terrified of him. Next man is, in 1990, she met another guy, John Chillingworth. He was 43. The following year with him, she had a son named Eric. So she had a bunch of kids by this time with all these different men, which is kind of crazy because I wouldn't stay with her. That relationship only lasted 3 years, and then she ended up having an affair on him with a guy named John Price. This is where the story really gets interesting. John Price. He was born on January 6th of 1955, was the father of 3 children, and he was well known around town. Everybody liked him. His own marriage ended in 1988. His youngest 2-year-old daughter stayed with his former wife, and then he had 2 older kids that lived with him. John was well aware of Katherine's violent reputation, but he still let her move in with him and his 2 kids. But a statement he made was that life was great, it was a bunch of roses, until... Dun, 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 dun. Well, it's said that John's kids really liked her, their life was happy, they got along great. But in 1998, they had a huge argument because he refused to marry her. So what does she do in retaliation to get back at him? She videotaped some stuff that he had allegedly stolen from work. And it was like old medical supplies that were outdated that he salvaged up. But what happened? He got fired. A job that he had worked at for 17 years, he got fired from because he didn't want to marry her. And she was being payback. Because of her doing that and him losing his job, he kicked her out, but she went back to her home, that I guess her government home, and when she went back, news started to spread around town of what she did to him, which, remember, everybody liked him. In February of 2000, several assaults had happened, and what really fed John up is she stabbed him in the chest, and so he was finally fed up and he kicked her out. But February 29th, he took out a restraining order on her, and he told co-workers at his new job that if he didn't come into work tomorrow, because he had just put this restraining order on her, if he did not come into work tomorrow, then Katherine had killed him and make somebody come look for him. They told him not to go home. His co-workers told him not to go home, but his kids were there, and he knew that if he didn't come home or if something happened, she would kill the kids because that's just the type of person that she was. When John arrived at home that night, he found that the kids were not there, that Knight had actually arranged for them to go to a sleepover, and Katherine wasn't there. So he went to the neighbor's house and stayed there for a little while, and then didn't come home till like 11 o'clock that night, and she still wasn't there. But earlier that day, Katherine had purchased black lingerie and had videotaped like the kids and her children and making comments which have since been interpreted through the court system that it was her will. She videotaped like her will, because I think she was, just wait and you'll get more information of. Katherine later went to John's that night and tried to wake him up, and supposedly she woke him up and they had sex, and then he went back to sleep. At 6 a.m. the next morning, his neighbors seen that his car still had not left for work, and that was unusual. And then his co-worker went to his home, and then there was a neighbor there banging on the door or whatever. So then they start banging on his windows, nobody was coming. And then they finally went to the front door. They went to the front door and they noticed blood on the door. So then they called the police. The police arrived around 8 o'clock, and they broke the door down, and they found Katherine unconscious in a comatose state from taking too many pills, and they found John's body. She had stabbed John with a butcher's knife while he was sleeping. To the blood evidence, he woke up and tried to turn on the light, and then she started stabbing him, and he tried to escape, but she chased him through the house. He managed to open the front door and get outside, but was dragged back into the hallway, where he finally died later from bleeding out. Later on that night, Katherine left the home and went to the ATM and got $1,000 out. His autopsy revealed that he had been stabbed at least 37 times in the front and back, and punctured a lot of vital organs. Several hours after John Price had died, Katherine skinned him and hung him on the meat hook. Now remember, she used to work in a meat thing, so she had like meat hooks. Then decapitated him and cooked parts of his body. She cooked parts of his body. Now, the meat that she cooked, this is what the menu was. Let me read it to you. She served it with baked potato, pumpkin, beetroot, zucchini, don't know what that is, cabbage, yellow squash, and gravy in 2 settings at the dinner table, along with notes beside each plate that had a note with each of his children's names. So she planned on feeding the dad to the kids. A third meal was thrown out on the back lawn, and it's been speculated that Katherine tried to eat it and then she couldn't. And this has been put forward of her claim that she has no memory of the crime. So she's pulling that card. She had no memory of the crime. His head was found in a pot of vegetables. The pot was still warm at 104 degrees. So the temp that it was, they know that she was cooking him earlier in the morning hours. Sometime after she killed him, she propped him up with his legs crossed, and his hands were draped over a 2-liter bottle. This was claimed in court to be an defilement demonstrating. So she was setting up the crime scene, trying to. She actually left a note. I guess she thought she was going to commit suicide by taking all the pills, but she left a note on a picture of him, and this is what the note read. It is kind of disturbing. Time you got back, Jonathan, for raping my daughter. You too, Beck, which was Price's daughter. For Ross. For Little John, his son. Now play with Little John's penis, John Price. So it's pretty much saying that his son raped her daughter and just all kinds of crazy accusations. But they were found to be groundless. So hopefully they were, and maybe she's just continuing to be psycho. Katherine's initial offer was to plead guilty to manslaughter, but it was refused, and she was arraigned on March 2nd, 2001 on the charge of murdering Price, to which she entered a plea of not guilty. Her trial was initially fixed for July 23rd of 2001, but was adjourned due to her counsel's illness, and it was refixed for October 15th of 2001. A lot of back and forth happened in the court. Katherine still refused to accept responsibility for what she did to Price. She would not take responsibility for her actions at all. Even though she had this crazy past and all this stuff she's done, she didn't remember. When a man named Timothy Lyons took the stage of the courtroom and was telling the jury in the courtroom about John, how he was skinned and decapitated, Katherine went hysterical and she had to be sedated. Crazy. June 8th, a judge pointed out that the nature of the crime and Katherine's lack of remorse required a severe punishment. So they looked at her and seen, oh, she don't care. She says she don't remember. Oh, she's all fine. But this was a huge crime. I mean, how she did it, what she did afterwards. I could see maybe killing him, but then wanting to feed him to the kids. Crazy. She was sentenced to life in prison. She was the first woman that was imposed on in Australian history. She was Australian, but she was the first woman to be sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. On June 2006, she tried to appeal the life sentence, claiming that the penalty of life in prison without possibility of parole was too severe for his killing. Too severe for his killing. He's dead. You tried to feed him to his kids. The appeal was dismissed. It was a crazy story, and I hope you enjoyed it. I love reading this stuff, and if you want me to continue making videos like this, just comment below, like my page, like this video, subscribe, comment down below if you have anyone that you think I should look into. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching. Bye.